Sure. My name is Gary Maxwell. I'm from the central Pennsylvania area. A little bit of my employment background. I was in the military from 71 to 75 and was on board three ships that, unbeknownst to me, was loaded with asbestos. And I get out of the military, went to broadcasting school. I was in the radio for like 16 years, and part of that was working for ESPN for live camera events, live events, I should say. And then I owned a business for 28 years after my surgery. I just couldn't do it. So I decided to sell my business, which was a pre-owned car dealership.
So you were in the military. What branch were you in?
I was in the Coast Guard from 71 to 75, the last 4 years of the Vietnam War.
And so that's where you were exposed to asbestos?
Other places other than the military, but predominantly the military. Of course, there was no pipes behind the walls on board ships. They were wrapped with asbestos. Some of them, the pipes were hot water, some were cold water, some were steam, and so you had to be careful not to get burned by those. The wiring in the ship had the cloth coating, and that was to keep it from fireproof, and that was contained asbestos. And the fire suits on board ship for general quarters, the fire hoses on board. The ship that I was on, the first one, was commissioned, I think, in 43 or 44. And the bedding, instead of cotton, the mattress was asbestos, as well as the pillows.
So did you have any idea while you were in the military that this was a risk?
No, not at all. Not at all. And the thing is that the ship that I was on, because of the steel in demand for making other tanks and stuff, the ship I was on was supposed to be a 317-foot ship, but they cut it down to 255 feet. But they still used the same 5-inch gun on the front of the ship. And they told you that whenever and to give you an idea how bad it was, whenever we had gunnery drills in the 5-inch gun, you were told to stay off the bulkhead and keep your mouth agape a little bit, because the seismic shock from the gun being fired, if you're leaning against the bulkhead, possibility of snapping your spine, or it would break your teeth if you had your mouth closed, supposedly. But whenever they did fire the guns, and you're walking down and you see a portal from the ship, walking down the hall, it looked like somebody took a dust mop and just shook it, and that was asbestos.
When did you learn that there was a risk or that you had been exposed to asbestos, or there was a risk that you may have been? When did you learn of this?
I didn't really learn originally about the risk, other than I was out splitting wood, and this was years after, and I noticed that I had difficulty breathing. I just couldn't catch a full breath, and so I went to my family doctor, and he goes, "Well, it sounds like bronchitis." So he gave me a round of antibiotics, and 10 days later, still it's not good. So they gave me another round of different antibiotics, and nothing. So he couldn't get me in to see a pulmonologist right away. So he told me to go to the local hospital emergency room just to get x-rays and stuff. And so the following morning after the x-rays, he calls my house and he says, "I want you to go to your local hospital and for an emergency procedure." And I'm thinking, what the heck is this? So what it was called a thoracentesis. Now, the story that I'm going to be telling you is my experience, and in my experience only. It's just that no medical, I guess, forecast in your health, but this was what happened to me. The thoracentesis is a fairly easy, simple procedure, a little uncomfortable, but it's not painful, where they go in and remove the fluid from around your lung and the pleural lining. And so they sent it out, and it came back atypical cells. Okay, fine. And so 10 days later, it's even worse, to the point where I really couldn't breathe that well. Went in for a second thoracentesis, and they drew off more fluid. and they also took a biopsy, 5-point biopsy, and it came back as a malignant mesothelioma.
So it sounds like it was a relatively quick process to find out that you had mesothelioma. Is that correct?
Yes, because my family doctor didn't know what it was, and he says something suspect. So that's when he sent me in for. I don't think it came back that the chest area was a little cloudy, and I'm thinking, okay, so the trek began to try to find a surgeon to do this.
So when you found out that it was in fact malignant mesothelioma, did you know what mesothelioma was? Had you ever heard of it? Did you know anybody with it?
You've seen commercials on TV. All I really heard was malignant. That's the word that stood out in my mind. And I just told my family doctor, find somebody. I want this stuff out of me. And my neighbor, 6 months prior to that, he was exposed, and he went to a surgeon and had the surgery done, which was the surgeon that I had. And he highly recommended him, so I went to him.
Who was your surgeon?
Dr. Joseph Friedberg.
I've heard of him. I've written about him a couple times. I've
Yes.
heard great things.
Yes, currently he is at Temple University. He works out of Fox Chase Cancer Center. Nice man, great guy. Like he treats you like he's your best friend. It was a pleasant experience, other than knowing that I had cancer.
So with Dr. Friedberg, were you treated at Temple or before he moved there?
No, I went down to, well, he was actually at a previous university, but he was going down to the University of Maryland Medical Center in Baltimore. So until he got set up, he started me on I started says, look, my family doctor is just, he said, just start your guy on 4 rounds of chemo, and when I get down here and get set up, I'll get him down here and we'll do the surgery. And okay, so there was no time wasted. From my understanding, chemo follows the surgery and not before, which I don't know if this was anything better or not, as far as getting the chemo first.
Interesting. So how long would you say your rounds of chemo were until you underwent surgery?
Oh, it's from the dates are in my mind, not to be forgotten. December 22nd of 14 was my first of 4 rounds of chemo, and my last round of chemo was January 17th. It consisted of 8 hours of infusion on a Monday, 8 hours of infusion with hydration on both of those days. Wednesday and Thursday, 3 hours of hydration, and then Friday was what they call a Granite shot. And they also gave me Granite shots on Wednesday and Thursday as well. A lot of people are afraid that, oh my gosh, the chemo, you see these stories of like people getting sick. I didn't get sick. And it could be different for other people, but from my experience, I didn't get sick at all. I was just very tired.
That's very interesting, because you do hear a lot that it really takes a toll on people and they aren't feeling well at all. And that's very interesting that you didn't feel that way at all.
No, like I said, my Granite shot was on a Friday. Saturday, I started feeling a little sluggish. Sunday, didn't want to do anything. Monday, things looked a little brighter, and Tuesday, I was back to my normal self.
And so when did you have your surgery?
April 16th of 2015.
And what surgery did you have?
I had a pleural decortation, and my understanding of this is that, and it sounds it sounds a lot worse than what it is, because I've had people say, well, what did it feel like? And I just tell them I was asleep. But it's a pleural decortation. And in my case, what they did was they went in and they collapsed my left lung, which was the one that was affected. And they removed the pleural lining around your lung. And then they re-inflate it.
And so what was your recovery process like after that?
Pain medications for a while. My favorite meal going through this process of my chemo is that I loved scrambled eggs and toast, and I don't know why, but that tasted good to me, so I just kept eating it. And it took a while. They encouraged walking a lot to get your energy and your strength back.
So I'd like to go back a little bit to your diagnosis.
Okay.
So you said it was a relatively quick process once you felt symptoms and were officially diagnosed with mesothelioma. What was that like? What was that day like? How did that make you feel, your family?
Well, my doctor, my pulmonologist, they said, well, we'll have to make it. This is Friday. I knew that they called and said, hey, your report's in. I said, okay, I'm coming over. No. We'll schedule Tuesday or Monday for next week. And I just said no. And I went into the medical records department at the hospital and I said, I want these records now. And if you get a runaround, if anybody says no or putting it off, tell them no. I want this now. You deserve it, because it's emotionally cruel. You don't know what the answer to it was. Whenever I found out and I showed my wife, she broke down into tears. And I just said, okay, now we know what we're dealing with. Let's take care of this. Let's get it out of me.
I mean, your outlook, you seem very positive that you knew immediately we've got to get this done and there's no way around it. It's just get it done and get it out. And
Oh yeah.
that's amazing.
Yeah. It's you hear people say, oh, what stage? What stage? You know, 1, 2, or 3. It doesn't matter what stage that you have. You have it. What does it matter how far? You need to get it out of you if you want a fighting chance at living. And if you're watching the video, you're either diagnosed with it, or a family member, a loved one, or a friend has it. So it's quite the experience to have been told you have malignant mesothelioma.
Mm-hmm. And so I know you say it doesn't matter what it was, it just means that you have it, but do you mind sharing what exactly your diagnosis was?
The thoracic surgeon that I used for my recall, he really didn't stage it, but he says, hey, this is where it's at. It's in the left lung, and we need to take this out. We need to as soon as possible. It's not that it was an urgent matter on his part, but it was an urgent matter on my part, because I wanted it out of me. I wanted to live, and I didn't want to live with this tumor in me.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you were the biggest advocate for yourself, and that seems to be very important.
Yeah, after I got back on my feet, I found out that I could no longer run my business, so I sold it. But I've told the thoracic surgeon's office that if anybody's diagnosed and they want answers, or to give me a call. And I've talked to a lot of veterans, and and I try to make it a light conversation. I don't try to give medical advice. Like I said, I just said, this is my story. This was what happened to me. And you hear and read places things where post-surgery, you have a 12 to 21 month window of living. I just had my 8.5-year scan, and nothing's changed. So I think getting diagnosed early, that's the key to it. If you
Mhm.
if you're feeling bad, you think you have bronchitis, and your doctor says, "Well, I don't know what happens," go for a second round of antibiotics. No, talk to whoever to let them listen to you. Get them to listen and say, "Look, I think there's something else going on."
Absolutely. And that's amazing that you stood your ground and you said, tell me now and let's get this moving.
Yeah, yeah. No time to waste. I mean, but the surgeon that did my surgery, Dr. Freeberg, I mean, when the first time my wife and I met him, he came in and he goes, "Hey, how you doing?" I said, "Good." And he said to my wife, "Oh, I love your hair." And my wife says, "Oh, I like your shoes." And here I am with a pair of sneakers on. So it was like meeting an old friend that you haven't seen in a while.
I bet that was very comforting,
Oh, yes.
especially being in such a vulnerable position that someone comes in and is so welcoming and makes you feel a little more comfortable in such an unknown time.
Yeah, and you're at ease too. It's yeah, yeah. And the gentleman who was diagnosed, I'm not saying that it's a family-like setting, like, but it's a club that you don't want to be a part of. But if you are in that club, you want to help whoever you can. Just like my neighbor, him and his wife traveled down to Baltimore to be with my wife for my surgery. And that man was very weak, but this is what you do.
Well, I'm glad you had support. Like that seems like the very most important thing. Um, so your wife was there with you throughout the whole process,
Yes,
and was she your caregiver, or did you have any outside help? Who would you say was like part of your tight knit group during that time?
she was my caregiver, and that's a good point that you brought up. Um, the caregivers, be it your wife, family member, or a friend, uh, they're the ones that are going to go through hell because they're going to see everything that you're going through. I would strongly urge the caregivers to keep a diary, keep a log from the day that you're diagnosed until you feel that you're out of the woods. Um, the things that she saw, the things that she experienced, driving an hour and 10 minutes each way just to be with me. It takes a lot out of them. I had a chance to read my wife's journal, and I went into my office at home to read this, and I came out in tears. I said, "You went through all of this?" And she said, "Yeah." I said, "Boy, I don't, I, I felt bad for her, and she felt bad for me, um, but yeah, they see everything. They see it all in the hospital."
And I'm sure it was very unfortunate, but I bet it brought you two closer together and brought you more
Yeah,
of a connection through that time.
yes, it did. And I spent, and again, it's this. What happened to me is I spent 11 days in the shock trauma unit at the University of Maryland, and this is like, wow, it's like an ICU on steroids. There's somebody around the clock just checking on you. And I'm not saying that it was a pleasant experience, but it was certainly a memorable one. That these people are here to help me. Boy, they've got it together. And I had the opportunity to go to Fox Chase for once my thoracic surgeon went to Temple, and again, this is a Fox Chase, wonderful hospital in Temple. People at Temple, they they know what's going on, and they're, I tell you what, they're to have Dr. Freeberg on their staff. Yeah, it's a superb surgeon.
Well, that's great to hear because I've written about him. We have him on our website, and it's great to hear firsthand that he is just as good as I've written about him, and
Mhm.
that's awesome to hear.
Yeah. Well, my wife says, so how did the surgery go? And he looked at us and he goes, well, it's as good as it gets. And I'm thinking, okay, what does that mean? But it was as good as it gets. And you know, 8.5 years later, here I am. It's I wasn't being a business owner and stuff, and you know the trials and the pressures of business. When I came home, I sometimes I wasn't in a very good mood. Um, Now I I don't have a bad mood. I don't have a bad day. I uh, I wake up in the morning and go outside, and I thank God for another beautiful day, because it could be raining, it could be a snowstorm, it could be hail, it could be hot as anything or frigid cold. It's still a wonderful day because you're here. Um, and like I would go out on the porch and sit and watch the birds. You know, my wife, she would always go out and feed the birds and water the birds, um, and I would say, why are you feeding them? All they're going to do is like mess on our cars. And now I'm out there watching them, feeding them, and watering them. It's a different outlook. It's a different. Uh, I'm at peace no matter what happens.
So you mentioned being in the Coast Guard. Did you inquire about any VA claims? Did you pursue any of that?
I It was determined, you know, that among other places, that the Coast Guard was equally, I was equally exposed, and I filed for a VA claim, and I was denied 3 times.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's never, don't take no for an answer, because if it's something that you believe in, do it. Um, yeah, don't let anybody tell you no, um, because I'm sure other veterans have applied for disability like myself, and they got it right away, and I don't know why. The system, um, I guess, is who you get as a person that reviews your claim.
So you were you eventually approved? You eventually received some benefits, or
Yes,
you
yes, I
did?
did. Mhm.
How were you able to finally get it through to them?
Keep fighting, keep fighting, and if you're tired, and if your veteran service officer, if you don't feel comfortable with them, I had to go to a law firm in DC to get them to represent me, because I had no idea. Paperwork, I have a file upstairs in my office that's probably 2 inches thick of paperwork.
What benefits did you apply for, and which ones did you end up receiving?
Um, After my surgery, they paid full benefits 100% for 2 years. And then after that, it dropped to 10. Um, I'm sure that most scars over 4 inches get 10% disability, but it was a hard fight. It yeah, I'm just waiting to hear more correspondence from the VA as to you know what they can do for me and what else they're going to do.
So this is an ongoing thing for you.
Yeah, yes, it
Wow.
is.
Well, that's great that you were able to find someone to help you out and get you what you deserve.
Yeah, and well, another person that has helped me is one of your associates at Mesothelioma Guide. I talked with him from the very beginning, and boy, I don't know what I would have done without him. I mean, your organization. I mean, if you want to feel that you have the best people working for you, talk to you guys, because it's yeah, they will help you through it all.
Well, that's great to hear. I really appreciate you saying that. I mean, I know Carl just from working with him, and I know he's great and he's very passionate about what he does. And it's great to hear that from the other side as well.
Yep, that's who I talked to was Carl. We would sit on the phone sometimes for half hour, 45 minutes, just talking about things, you know. letting him know how I feel. But one thing that he has helped me with, and telling me that there's no need to feel guilty or feel bad about it, is post-traumatic stress. It's very real. So I have night terrors. I have bad dreams about my surgery. Everything went well, but of course your mind has a different direction to go, and the night terrors and the anxiety attacks. It's very real, and it's normal. It's normal.
Do you still struggle with that?
Yeah, yeah. I I have to. Well, post surgery, I myself personally, I have numbness on the left side of my body, and the left side is very, very painful to touch. And I guess that's one of the residuals, but I'm here to talk about it. You know, if this is what I'm left with, it's not so bad after all. And the thing is that with anybody who would call, and I talked to them, and my wife would say, are you okay with this? And I said, why not? Our friend was there for me, and all I'm doing is paying it forward. And I'm my experience. Of course, it's scary, and you want to get out of the hospital, and but what a positive result.
So you spent a lot of time with your wife. Was there anyone else besides your neighbor, any other family members, anyone else that you'd like to talk about their experience and maybe offer some advice for other caregivers on ways to navigate it?
My two stepsons, I mean, they were very, I mean, the youngest, he would come down with his girlfriend, which is now his wife. Um, they would come down, and they make sure that they would see how I'm doing, if I needed anything. And but one thing, the grandson, whenever they would come down to the house the first time after my surgery, and of course, you have a shirt off, and he didn't want me to hold him because he thought that Grampy had a snake on his back, which was the scar. It's about a 12-inch scar on my back.
And I bet that was difficult.
Yeah, I just put my t-shirt back on and just decided to walk with him hand in hand. And it along with this, it takes a lot out of you. Like I really can't lift much over like 20, 25 pounds, because if I do that, my scar, it hurts. And I don't know why that is.
And so it still hurts today?
Oh yeah, to this day, yes, it's painful. And I have to sleep on my right side because I can't sleep on my back because of the pain. I can't sleep on my stomach because of the pain. Certainly can't sleep. I had a sleep study done, and again, I never thought about this, because I just wasn't getting a good night's sleep, and being when I say by waking up 5 or 6 times, it's from the pain. It's painful, and there's no rhyme or reason as to why. In my case, one of my ribs was resected, so that way they can get back there. But I had a sleep study done at the VA, and I think my oxygen saturation rate, if I recall, was 75%, which is dangerously low. And I had 55 events per hour where I actually stopped breathing and continued to breathe. So now I sleep with a CPAP, and that noise keeps me awake sometimes, but it's a lot better than not being healthy in your sleep and getting a good night's sleep, which I do now because I sleep much better. But one thing about whenever you're diagnosed, all is not lost, because you have the opportunity to have surgery and to go for chemo, and boy, don't give up. You can't give up. Talking to veterans, some will still call and say, hey, how you doing? And we get the chance to talk, even though a lot of us we never met. We still talked and had a good time talking. And I, all this time, I hear the word cancer, the commercials on TV. There, I have to put them on mute or change the channel or something. That's just me, because there are times I just don't want to be reminded. But if somebody says, what were you sick from, and I said cancer, but I don't give the word and any power. I just say I was sick. I don't use the C word. No, it's just the experience was enough. I don't have to give it any. Like I said, my outlook on life has changed. But grandkids and great grandkids and my name to them is Grampy. I'm like, oh my gosh. But yeah, I would love to see the grandkids graduate from high school. That's my wish.
And so you say that it's totally changed your outlook on life. Did that happen once you entered remission, or did that happen once you were diagnosed? When did you feel this change happen?
Shortly after my surgery, and I heard, the term as good as it gets, and my surgeon says that you get terms like, oh, I'm in remission, or but my surgeon used the term complete remission. And I guess that since my my first surgery, well, the only surgery I had, the CAT scans have not changed at all.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's great news.
Sure. And there are, like I said, that's this is my story and what happened with me. And sure, some of the people that I talked to over the phone that I have become close with, no longer with me. I mean, that's sad.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah. But the reality of it is that, okay, you have it. What do I do to get rid of it? I don't want it to come back. I've even, this isn't my own belief, but I quit eating sugar. I quit eating white flour. And there's a plant called stevia. That's a natural sweetener.
Mm-hmm.
Because whenever you have a PET scan done, and I've had 2 of those, what they do is they inject a radioactive fluid into you, or isotopes or something, and along with that is a very, very high fructose. Cancer tumors love sugar, and that's why whenever you have a PET scan, my understanding is that the sugar goes right to the tumor. It's sucked into the tumor somehow, and along with the radioactive isotopes, and that's what lights up on the PET scans. So I've stopped sugar. I've stopped drinking diet sodas because the artificial sweeteners in there are not really good for you either. So yeah, stevia. It's a plant.
Interesting. So were there any other lifestyle changes you made during your journey that you think had a positive impact?
Yeah, I'm a lot more laid back. Like I said before, some people would think I was not a very nice person, but it's just like we just we had a dog. We have a dog that's 8 years old, and my wife got that because shortly after my surgery, it's just like the house was quiet, and so my wife came home with a puppy, and I said, "Why do we have to do that?" I had 2 dogs that I had to put down within 9 months of each other from cancer. And I just said, that's the toughest thing I ever had to do, was put these the two dogs down. So now we have a 9-month-old puppy, and she is a terror. She will chew up anything. And this morning, my wife said, "Oh, she chewed up the edge of the carpet, the wall-to-wall carpet." And I just said, "All right." And then what we'll do is just have somebody come out and put new carpet in, or try to fix it. Before, I would not say lose it, but I'd be very upset with the dog. Not anymore. It's, don't sweat the small stuff. That's all it is.
Absolutely. I mean, I think everybody should take that word of advice. Don't sweat the small stuff.
No, no. And whenever you're first diagnosed, I only way I could say this is that fear is a liar. Don't no, don't believe it, because of course you get yourself all worked up. It's just like it's a worthless emotion. You're afraid of something that may never happen, and I've concluded that fear is a liar.
So do you think you were conscious of that when you were diagnosed and through your treatment and stuff? Were you conscious of not letting the fear get to you, or is that something that you've overcome through time?
I think over time, there was a lot going on in that time, and again to say to the caregivers that keep that diary, because things are going to move fast. You're going to forget a lot of things, and a lot of times my wife had referred back to her diary, to her journal that she kept, to the point what I've eaten that day, what I've had to drink, how I felt, temperature. There were so many things that she entered into the journal. And he said, "Oh me, remember back whenever we went down here and uh, and I said, "No." So we go back to the journal, and I said, "Oh yeah, now I remember." And the the real slap in the face was that down at the University of Maryland in Baltimore, whenever I got out of the hospital, being there for 11 days, we're riding along the harbor, and I looked up at my wife and I said, "What do you see to the right?" And she says, "A Coast Guard ship, an old one." Yeah, it was the sister ship of the one that I was on. I thought I was hallucinating, but no, it's there in Baltimore. So
Wow.
yeah, it yeah, boy, I smile more. Um, I want to do more, even though I can't. Um, After chemo, and again, my what I've gone through is short-term memory loss. Uh, and when you've had 4 rounds of chemo, I have severe polyperipheral neuropathy in my feet and my hands, where they're numb. I feel like stabbing pains, like like somebody's stabbing me with a needle in my feet, or they hurt, or I get cramps to the point where my feet contort to a strange way, or I can feel like my feet are on fire, or I'll drop something. I've other than this glass of water, I've become accustomed to using plastic glasses, so that way if I drop them, they won't break.
I think that your story saying that you saw the sister ship after the hospital, that's interesting.
Yeah.
What do you think that, how did you feel about that? What did you think when you saw that? Are you thinking, I live to look you in the face and show you that you can't take me? Or did you see it as a slap in the face? And how did you take that?
Um, well, for the first 2 years, every 3 months I had to drive to Baltimore, or my wife would drive me, or somebody would drive me to Baltimore for the results of the CAT scans. And there's no other way out of Baltimore where I was at except to go down along the harbor. So it just got to the point where I just tried to tune it out, and I was just like, "Oh, look to the left, and never to the right towards the water." Um, I don't want to be reminded. I'm reminded of that every single day when I wake up, because it's painful and it's uncomfortable. And so I try to, well, not really have to put on a happy face, but I don't let someone know whenever I'm in more pain than usual. And this is from my surgery, this is one of the effects for me. I don't know how it would be for someone else, what they would feel and go through. But my wife was a trooper. Hmm, I, whenever I had the report done when it said I had malignant mesothelioma, the second thoracentesis that I had done, going back a little bit, they were just going to draw the fluid off. They weren't going to do any biopsy, and my wife demanded that a biopsy be done, or else we're going to go to a different hospital. And my pulmonologist was 3 minutes from getting on a plane to fly to California. So my wife said, if we don't get it, we're going somewhere else. Plainly put, my wife saved my life, because after the second thoracentesis, and this is kind of scary, I still get chills from it. After the second draw off fluid, the symptoms went away. It's like it never happened.
Really?
Yeah, and that she was there, and she said, "Nope, we're going someplace else if you don't get that." So they did like five-point biopsy. Oh yeah, she was very adamant about getting this done, and to this day, I mean, like I said, she's my hero, because she stood up for me when I was too scared to speak for myself.
That's amazing.
Mm.
That's amazing that you have somebody so strong in your corner who's
Yeah.
willing to stand up. And
Yeah, for 10 days, 10 days having a fluid draw off, and 10 days later having more fluid draw off, and for it to go away after the second draw off of fluid around my lung, and for the symptoms to go away. Oh yeah, I had a full breath after that, and no symptoms.
wow.
Yeah. So I was diagnosed November 3rd of 14. And then we found a place to go for the chemo. And that's another thing, you go to an oncologist. We went to a couple of them, and we wanted to see their infusion units. And you go into one, and they're just sitting there like, and half of them are asleep, half of them just staring off into space. My third place was actually the hospital that I went to for the two procedures that I had, the two thoracentesis. And we went to the infusion unit, and we're walking down the hall, and we hear people laughing and just having a good old time. And I'm thinking, like, we're looking for the infusion unit. And it goes, yeah, this is it. And everybody's talking across the hall from the beds from each other, and had TVs on. And so even after that hospital closed down and a lot of the staff went to another hospital, I go to the same hospital for my CAT scans here. I always make it a point of going to see those people and tell them the results of the scan, because they really weren't nurses. They were angels. And the one nurse said, "I'd be really upset if you wouldn't stop in to see me to tell me the results." Yeah, it's they've seen it all. And my wife, I told her after my first 8 hours of infusion, don't bother sitting with me, just come back and get me when it's ready. And a real sad time that she had was the infusion unit was on the second floor, and she was coming down the street right next to the hospital, and she caught the red light there. And she happened to look up, and she saw me with all of these different bags around me of chemo drugs and hydration. And she started crying. because that's my husband up there getting, getting the infusion. So it's the chemo was cisplatin and Alimta. They're two. I'm trying to remember what they're called. They're called platinum drugs. I don't know why, but they did the job. They did the job. After my first infusion, my veins in my arm, my left arm, where it was, they said, oh, well, the veins were not looking good. So then they, after my first round was over, I had to have a Mediport put in my chest because I guess my veins in my arm couldn't handle it. And a couple of days later, after the Mediport was put in, it threw a blood clot. So I couldn't have the surgery until the Mediport was out. And so the fourth round of chemo, I'm feeling burning in my chest, and my chest was swelling up. And apparently the Mediport was leaking chemo under my skin. So I was on a drug to thin the blood, and without reason or without cause, I just started bleeding from my nose. And so, but anyway, the point is that it got everything was after the chemo. It was a day surgery to put my Mediport in because I was out under anesthesia. The surgeon here couldn't put me under because the blood clot was still there, so they had to take the Mediport out in the surgeon's office with me still awake. Now I'm saying this won't happen. If weird stuff would happen, it happened to me. I'm sure it won't be the case, of what the people who have been diagnosed will go through. But yeah, it's
Wow.
but yeah. So the blood clot was resolved, and I had my surgery, and that's still painful where the Mediport was. But again, I'll take pain there as opposed to to dying. I'm here, and I'll handle the pain and discomfort.
I have a couple more questions, but are there any other topics you want to discuss, or is there anything else you would like to share that you feel like we haven't touched on yet?
The professionals, they are the professionals in the medical field, but if it's an answer that you don't like, ask why. Be your own advocate. In my case, it was my wife because her name's Donna, and boy, this whole part of my life that I had to go through, it changed our lives, and I think for the better. I mean, there are sometimes, where, well, for instance, a friend says, "Can you remember what it was like before you were diagnosed?" And that's a good question because I don't remember what it was like, what my mood was, and and what life was like before. But now, life, I see everything. I take the time to notice things. Where before I was like, okay, that looks all right. But now it's just like trees, the different colors, the different hues of green. Yeah, and you're kinder, I think, because you're thankful. You're thankful that you're alive. And for those who have gone on, it was an honor to have known them. Yeah, it was an honor.
So do you have any advice to give patients who are newly diagnosed or maybe navigating the diagnosis process, treatments, people who are now survivors, caregivers? Do you have any words of encouragement that you'd like to share with them?
But those who've just been diagnosed. That's why, you know, I'm here to talk to the people. Like I said, either you've been diagnosed, or a loved one or a friend has been diagnosed, and it's just like if you were to fall in the woods and you have a big stick sticking in your arm, you just don't leave it there. You know, you have it taken out, because it'll feel a lot better once it's out. And I think emotionally, you feel a lot better once the tumor and the cancer is removed. It's a process, but it's something that you have to do. And I wanted to do it. As soon as I found out, I want this out of me. I want this out of me now. You know, when do we start? And that's whenever Dr. Freeberg says, okay, let's start you on 4 rounds of chemo up here. And then when I'm ready for you down in the University of Maryland in Baltimore, they'll be ready for me. And that's what happened. I think I was the second surgery there. And his right-hand person, Melissa Culligan, she's something else too, very knowledgeable. And she always wants to know how I'm doing whenever I call for Zoom meetings and stuff after my CAT scans. Both of them are there. And I'm glad they are. I'm glad I talk to them every time, as opposed to me having to drive. Let's say, let's make it easier for you. Let's do a Zoom meeting. And still has a smile on his face. Still feels like he's a long lost friend. I mean, that's how he affects me. But you have to feel careful. You have to feel good about who is operating on you. If you have any questions or any doubts, get them answered first. I went into it not knowing what was going to happen.
And so when you were finally told that you were in complete remission, what was that like?
Guardedly optimistic. I don't know if that's a good enough answer, but guarded. I was happy. I was thrilled. They're like, okay, it's almost like waiting for the other shoe to drop. But yeah, I was guardedly optimistic. Glad to hear it. Yeah, glad to hear it. Very much so.
I think guardedly optimistic is probably the perfect way to put it. Like you said, it may not be the most perfect answer, but I don't think there is. I think that's realistic. Absolutely.
It's just like the answer he gave whenever my wife says, you know, how did surgery go? And he says, it's as good as it gets. And that was kind of, that's still, I still think about that statement. I'm thinking like, as good as it gets. All right, well, here I am, you know, 8.5 years later. I must be pretty good. Pretty good. And there are people out there who have survived as long as I have, and I think I know there's a few out there that are even longer. But you know, getting back to my doctor thinking that it was bronchitis. If you don't think that 2 rounds of antibiotics have helped you, or even after the first round, question it. You know, just say, hey, I mean, I think I should have an X-ray or a CAT scan, you know, with or without contrast. I want to know what's going on. And I know that's kind of overboard, but man, I mean, even if your insurance doesn't cover quite all of it, I think it's good to get one. Because for an X-ray, and it was my doctor, he didn't know what was going. He just couldn't figure it out. And he's a good doctor, my family doctor. But yeah, it's been a long journey, and you know, I try to forget if for a little bit, you know, have a mental vacation, but then you know, you turn one way or the other, it's like, oh yeah, there's that pain again. It's yeah, I mean, for me to not be able to lift anything over 20, 25 pounds, I mean, I can't even, you know, pick up and hold my granddaughter. I guess I could if I was sitting, but I have a fear of maybe not being able to feel with my hands and dropping her. It's you give up a lot. You give up a lot. You give up a lot. But at least I'm able to see them, and they're able to see me, and that's good enough. It's good enough. You know, I go to their birthdays. I hope I go to many birthdays. I hope I go to many graduations from my grandkids.
Or how would you compare your life now compared to 8.5 years ago, your day to day? So you're recovering from surgery, you're in pain, but what's it like now?
Life is yeah. It's just like somebody takes the blinders off of you, and you're able to say, wow. Even though you look at them every single day and you see these things, you look at them much differently. They're in much more detail, much more, I don't want to say vivid, but things stand out that you haven't seen before. You know, it's just like people, they get into their cars and they drive to work from home. Same route, same route. I'll take different routes because of things that I might have missed or things that I didn't see before in the eyes that I've seen. You know, my eyes before were, you didn't notice something, but then, oh yeah, it's like there was an old back a country road in Lancaster County where there's old tombstones dating back to the early 1800s. I never noticed that, but I made a point of pulling over and just kind of looking at the different gravestones and their names, where how they, you know, from the time period, when were they born, when did they pass. A lot of things that you see but you don't see. But now it's life is wonderful.
But any closing remarks? I think we've covered a lot of ground, and again, I really appreciate it. But if you have anything left to say, please do.
Well, obviously, the people watching this, like I said, they have been diagnosed or they have family members or friends. If you're a caregiver, be there for them. And I know the caregivers, like I said, they're the ones that go through hell because they see it. But if you once you make it through the surgery, I mean, you have much more love and you have much more compassion for the caregiver. In this case, you know, Donna, um, she gave up a lot, you know, to be there for me. Um, and like I said before, she saved my life because if she hadn't ordered those biopsies, I don't think I'd be here today. As a matter of fact, I know, because even if the symptoms go away, the tumor was growing or would have grown. So, you know, be your best advocate, and yet feel comfortable with the people who are going to be operating on you and the people who are going to give you your infusions, you know, of chemo. And I think I've had the best. And I'm sure there are other great surgeons out there who do this that will do a good job, do a fantastic job. But look at it as being the glass is half full and not half empty. Be optimistic, because you got to get your head in order, and you have to be okay with what's going to happen.